looks funny here.
It looks fine here.
Okay. I lead the digital archives program at Emory's Manuscript Archive and Rare Book. Whoa. Just keeping me on my toes this morning. Rare Book Library. And so I'm going to talk to you really briefly this morning. I actually thought I only had 5 minutes, so maybe not as briefly as about, in the past fiscal year, my team and I worked on measuring effort on managing Born Digital collections in Marvel. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the sort of the free open source web-based tool we use to do that measuring, and how we're trying to use the numbers we gathered to hopefully better use the tools we have to do the work we're trying to do. So there's 3 of us in my team, 3 full-time employees. None of us is like completely dedicated to processing Born Digital archives. We all have other work to do, but we do have 3 full-time staff in the unit. And as we were doing our business planning for FY 2014, one of the key things we wanted to do was start measuring what we're doing, how long it's taking, how many collections we're working through, how many files, et cetera. So one of our key pieces of business planning for last year was trying to identify the key areas we were going to measure and trying to define those work categories. Not exactly revolutionary categories that we came up with, but we identified these 5 main areas, which is obtaining the data, and that can mean going out to the field and getting the data, or getting a copy of the disk image that's already been imaged and reposited locally. And if it's a new acquisition, ingesting that into our archival storage, then the process of doing initial sort of triage-based appraisal and developing a processing plan for the project. The 4th stage of work is the kind of meat of what we consider the processing. It's the kind of restriction and privacy review, what is known as arrangement description and traditional manuscript processing. And then finally preparing those process materials for access. Right now, all of our access is just in the reading room. And so we created these 5 categories of work, and then we decided to use Redbooth as the tool we were going to use to actually track the work we were doing. It was actually Teambox when we started, turned into Redbooth while we were using it, but the transition was smooth. It didn't cause any trouble. So here's a quick screenshot of what it looks like, what our metrics look like, or what our measuring tool looks like within Redbooth. We actually took those 5 categories we identified and creating, those of you, has anyone here used, I saw Kari shaking her, so has anyone else used Teambox/Redbooth? So it basically works on this concept of task lists, and you can create templates for task lists. And so we created a task list template for processing based on our 5 categories of work. And that was sort of an effort to make sure we had some consistency on how we were measuring. So anytime we were starting a new processing project, one of the things that we did to kind of kick off that work was create a processing task list. As you can see, we've got Carol Ann Duffy, that one's done. Natasha Trethewey on the edge there, that one's still in process. That's a big project for this year. And this is one that I just quickly threw together so you can see the stages of work. Now here this is where the tracking really comes in. Within the task list, you can go into an individual task. For example, here's arrangement description, which is work I was doing on a collection, Mildred Thompson collection. And you can actually log each work session. And so it was really useful for someone like me, who will have sometimes long gaps between when I'm actually able to do processing work, because other things intervene. Because not only was I able to track how much time I was spending and when I was spending it, but I could also put key information about what I accomplished, what was problematic, what I needed to do next, and things like that. So it was both really useful for tracking effort, and as it happens, if you have gaps in your work between your work sessions, really useful to kind of keep us on track as we move through a processing project. So the main reason we went with Redbooth, even the free version has decent reporting capabilities. You can export these CSV files. Now, because we were using the free version, we had to do some aggregation of those reports at the end of the year because you get a monthly report. But it was, it took just a few minutes. It was not a significant burden. But as you can see, you can take a look at your month and sort of see by task roughly how the time is spread across the month. And then you get these really handy reports that have things like the processing project, the task, how much time, who the archivist was, who was doing the work. So you're able to slice and dice the data later and get some some pretty interesting information. So here's what we learned. And we kind of knew something, this is pretty high level, we would have known this anyway. But we worked on 6 collections over the course of the year. We completely processed 4 and made significant progress on 2 others. We processed over 2 gigabytes worth of data, over 4,000 files, and spent almost 400 hours of effort doing this work. Now, I have to say our averages were a little disappointing for me, because when I look at our backlog and I look at these averages, it makes me want to cry. But, we can only hope that this will be a baseline data and that it'll only improve from here. But, our average was really only about 5 megabytes per hour of effort and only about 18 files. So, obviously, we're hoping as we look at like a 5-year set of data that trend is going to go up. So here's and this is where the Red Booth tracking really came in handy, because we were able to see the data by task. And while it's not shocking, it was still pretty high impact to see how much of our effort has to do with what we think of as traditional arrangement description work. 71% is that restrictions and privacy review in A&D. If you add in the 19% that is the early appraisal and developing the processing plan, you're talking about 90% of our effort. So that's definitely the lion's share of what we're doing. So what does that tell us? Number one, we clearly need more data, hopefully data that is showing more and more efficient workflows. Last year we had a couple collections, the Lucille Clifton and the Rushdie, that had serious challenges. And so we're hoping as we move forward, maybe we'll have less of those, but who knows, that may be the norm, that every year we have a couple of collections that are really difficult and require lots of research and trial and error. So we've already modified our workflows a little bit based on this data. We've also already changed the way we're doing metrics, even since last year. So already had some initial changes. So as far as business planning goes, because I'm also a manager, I'm really excited about how we can use these numbers to better predict what we can do and how much of it we can do in a given year. I'm also excited about how this information can be taken back to our curators who go out and collect these collections and explain to them, okay, you want to bring in this amount of material. Just so you know, our average is 5 megabytes an hour. It's going to take us 2 years to get that processed. And all we're doing is processing that material. So big sort of 2 big pieces of kind of managerial work that we're hoping these kind of metrics are going to improve. And the big thing that's particularly relevant to Curate Gear is that we really want to begin to better understand our workflow and how we can start to use either the tools we're already using more efficiently so that we can get those numbers up, we can get through more data per hour, more files per hour, or find, as Carolyn was talking about, find new tools or new ways of using tools we haven't used before to get these workflows and especially these key tasks like appraisal, processing planning, which has been a really important part of our work this year, and then honestly, the review, the privacy and restrictions review, to get that much more streamlined and much more efficient so that we can actually begin to make significant progress on working through our backlog. And that's it. Thank you very much.